Do you think it's possible that there was a network of these serial killers, that perhaps Toole, Lucas, Dahmer knew each other? There was even an instance where Toole and Ted Bundy shared a prison cell in Florida.
That's weird, but obviously if they're in prison, they're not out on the loose doing anything together. In fact, Bundy is in prison by 78, and we're talking 81 for now. So for the longest time, I considered Toole to be just a serial confessor as well as Lucas. And I didn't give them any credibility on anything that they had confessed to, except for the arson murder up in Jacksonville, which is why he was in Florida State Prison and eventually died there. But I came to realize that I might be wrong on that. I was able, on everything that I have documentation. I have police and medical examiner, public records, large sources of, I have interviews that I've done, I've got previously published materials on whether I have a sense that Toole, Henry Lee Lucas, and Dahmer, I know that they were in the same very small general area of Sunny Isles, Florida, Sunny Isles Beach, in the end of May of 1981. I know because Toole and Lucas committed a murder in that Lucas gave a very good detailed confession to, and I saw the videotape, and I know the homicide detective, and I trust that. They were there together in 163rd Street in North Miami Beach, and Dahmer was working at 170th Street in North Miami Beach at the same time, and he was probably sleeping on the beach, which was only a block or so away. Where Dahmer was, it was across the street. And there's some other reasons to think, now it's not conclusive, it's definitely speculative, that Lucas may not have known Dahmer by name, or may only have known him by Jeff, who knows, but Toole seems to have made the connection to Jeff Dahmer that spring or summer of 81 in southern Florida. Now, Lucas and Toole as well had talked about the Hand of Death cult. And for the longest time, I thought that was a huge bunch of hooey. There's zero documentation, and it just sounded like, real horror film stuff. I changed my mind, not with documentation that this stuff existed and was real, but it's in my mind that it's conceivable. It isn't just a Florida thing, that Toole and Lucas, who were both separately talking about it from their prison cells. And I just don't know what to think. I mean, this gets into the conspiratorial stuff. First person who got the autopsy report narratives of Jeff Dahmer's victims from Milwaukee County, the first person outside of the institutions. And I shared them with Billy to see what could he discern from there, what could he tell me that hasn't been reported. Again, Billy was a paramedic as well in Arkansas, and Billy knows anatomy from Jeff. He saw that Jeff apparently kept his victims alive. They were being tortured. This was really horrendous stuff, and it's not been reported. Documents are now public record because I have them, and they just contradict. Now, Jeff said, I didn't like to see my victims go through pain. These people were alive when Jeff was cutting them up, and he kept them alive. It was, at the end, I wrote, rotten hell, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Russell, he kept them alive. He enjoyed it. He enjoyed what he did to me. He kept them alive with a thoracostomy tube, a breathing tube. He severed the spine at certain areas, many of his victims, so they couldn't get away or couldn't move or couldn't whatever, and stuff like that. It's all crazy. I could see where one of them had a tracheostomy. It's all crazy. And there's another thing called a cricothyrotomy. I mean, you got all these things that he was doing, and he knew that stuff better than anybody, probably, as well as a physician, probably. I mean, he's just dissecting people while they're alive. People, they don't get the sympathy for Jeff Dahmer should not be there. When he would beat me and then he would rape me, or he would rape me and then beat me, it was confusing. I didn't know what to expect. I got tied to a bunk, given drugs, all that kind of crazy stuff. He would get beside me, and he even told me he loved me one time. Stuff like that. And this guy was sick, okay? Somebody, and I think you know who I'm talking about, had trained this guy. He was not a regular guy, a regular 18, 19-year-old kid. He was not, okay? He had many years of training. For his age, I don't see how he had that much knowledge.
Killing spree that shocked a college town just as a new semester was beginning, the Gainesville murders. At the same time, authorities were investigating a similar pattern of violence in another state.
That's it? You can't answer any questions for me?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Is it true that you are talking through Mr. Lewis to investigators?
I can't make any further comments. Good day.
Is it true that you had anything to do with the murders at all?
Oh, I still got this arm, don't I?
Is it true that you had anything to do with the murders at all?
So we go in there, Clay gets the package, he opens it up, out come the 6 or 8 mini cassettes with hearts and flowers, Carla's handwriting, Paul, Leslie, and me, all this nonsense, like real evidence right on the cassette tape, never mind what's on the tape themselves. I say, where are the copies? The VHS copies. Because I know from Mr. Murray's former staff that he rented a special machine to convert the little mini cassettes into VHS format so he could play the VHS format without altering the originals. Mr. Cooper said there are no copies. I said, no, I think there are. He said, I'm telling you, there are no copies. One of the young ladies that used to work for Mr. Murray, who was in the room, said, oh yes, there are copies. To which he said, they're at my farm.
That individual was Mr. Tiny Boyles, a 440-pound, 6-foot bodyguard. Some years ago, Tiny had run across Mr. Bianchi and Angelo Bono. His meeting was to become significant in Dr. Orm's investigation, for Tiny had discovered that Mr. Bianchi was not quite the all-American boy he at first seemed.
But you do know that they were running a ring of prostitution and using young girls, exploiting them. Mainly for, the best I could find out in my investigation, they were using them for blackmail.
I get my excitement from making a woman happy. My trailer had numerous sex toys in it of different types, all different fetishes. I got pleasure out of the woman getting pleasure. I did what they wanted me to do.
It's at the time this broke, there were some pretty nasty things going on in town. Nothing to compare with what David was doing. But he'd been there for several years torturing people in this 8 by 25 foot trailer out in front of his house. And it's still hard for me to imagine that a lot of people in town didn't have some idea of what was going on.
Okay, let's start with the way you've laid out your book is very, very interesting. And again, if you're going to have a book that really compels people to read the story, this is, I think, the way to do it. So of course, you don't have to put it in chronological order. And I wanted to ask you why. You start with a prologue to your book, which isn't unusual in itself, but you include certain information in the very beginning of your book. Now, I wanted to ask you, what is included in the prologue, and why did you feel it best to put it where you did? Why are you introducing that information?
There's a couple of really interesting facts that come out in the prologue. Let me just read one little section. This is the first thing you read in the book.
Yes.
This is a police search warrant from April 13th, 1999. And you have to remember that the description of this video that you're going to hear from this police warrant, I never saw a video showing any of this at all. But I did see the hard copy from the police. Listen to this. The black mask in the storage shed, David's storage shed that they were searching, appears from the description given to be the mask or similar mask which David Ray has been observed wearing in videotapes which were seized from his residence and which were viewed by officers pursuant to previous search warrants. Well, I've always felt that there were videos that nobody's ever seen. I'm not even sure if Jim Yance, the prosecutor, saw this video. But I've always felt that the FBI had more material that they didn't release. So a lot of law enforcement people were worried that if the public got too much information about David Ray, it would incite a lot of violent behavior.
Wow.
So that's one thing, that search warrant, which remains mysterious to me because there's only one video of David that anybody has ever seen, anybody from the outside world like me or people who went to the two trials, and that's a 6-minute videotape, and David's definitely not wearing a black mask.